What up guys, Super Metal 983 here bringing you another Super Metal recommendations, and this is episode 7, and this one's kind of taking the concept that I done in episode 2, which is obviously a death metal spectacular, and this one's simply called a death metal spectacular part 2. And this one, for all 5 of them aren't death metal, only 4 of them are death metal, and I've got a thrash metal release in there that I definitely want to talk to you about, but yeah, a lot of it's orientated around death metal, so I thought, you know what, let's bring that title back for part 2, but yeah, we'll see what happens. But yeah, the first release we're going to be talking about is a melodic death metal release, and this one has been on repeat the past couple of months, and it has turned into one of my favourites of the melodic death metal genre. I'd say personally it's a bit more of a like modern melodic death metal, if you ask me, kind of like Scar Symmetry, but anyway, this is the one I'm talking about. This is Miserycorde by Oracles. Now, this release came out in 2016, and I've only just recently checked it out. I thought, you know what, I might as well give it a blast and see what it's like. And my God, was I floored by this release. This is easily one of the best modern, I'd say more modern death metal releases in my personal opinion. It kind of definitely has that kind of Scar Symmetry vibe, but it feels a lot more intense, and it feels like Scar Symmetry amped up a little bit as much as like the likes of Aborted is to the likes of let's say Cannibal Corpse, for example. It feels like it's upped that sort of ante in the whole world of melodic death metal, if you ask me. And I think this release is exquisite, if you ask me. Every song on the kills, from the intense blast beat to the majestic powerful clean vocal to the monstrous low vocals of Sven from Aborted. This release, I believe the band is kind of, if I'm not mistaken, it's basically System Divide, like modernized. That's kind of along the same sort of line. So if you're into System Divide or Scar Symmetry, you'll find something to like about these guys. It's very intense, very fast, but it's still very majestic, very powerful, and full of majesty, if you ask me. So if you haven't checked out this release, make sure you do so. It is a killer melodic death metal album that you really need to check out, especially if you're into the modern side of things. Next up, we're going to go for some brutal death metal, and this one has been one of my favourite brutal death metal releases that I've checked out in 2018. It's not a 2018 release, but it is just so pummelingly heavy. I definitely recommend this if you're a fan of the likes of Waking the Cadaver, for example. For all it's not like exactly like that, I just get that vibe from this release, but yeah, make sure you check it out. But this is Carnal Decay with You Owe You Pay. Now, this release I talked very briefly about in my unpackaging video for it, and as you saw, I got the shirt, and this album is just monstrously pummeling brutal death metal. It's quite riffy orientated, but it's still pummeling, and it actually sounds very monstrous. It's a very intense listen, and it just feels so crushing and to the point of asphyxiating to listen to, but it is easily one of the most devastating brutal death metal releases I've heard in a long time. Like a lot of brutal death metal for me, it has to have something different vibe for it, because for all there's a lot of great brutal death metal out there, there's a lot of stuff that still sounds the same as this, same as that. It's the same recipe over and over again. Whereas this one, I feel, offers a lot more in the sense of a pummeling factor, and it just feels just so obnoxious. It's absolutely incredible. So if you're into that sort of stuff, make sure you check out Carnal Decay's You Owe You Pay. I'd just like to say thanks to the guys for signing this CD. I'm really happy. This is definitely one of my gems in my collection now. So if you haven't heard this album, then definitely check it out. I need to expose myself to their older stuff, because apparently the older stuff is sick as well. So check that out. Next, we're going to break it up with some thrash metal, as I said at the start of the video. On this one, it's kind of going back to what I originally intended these videos to be, and that was albums that I don't find people discussing about and talking about these days, but I feel that they need to be talked about more, or brought back, if you know what I mean. And this is definitely one of those that fall into that category. I'm talking about Sylosis with Conclusion. Conclusion of an Age. I've always got Conclusion, but anyway. But this is an absolute monstrous album. This is easily one of the most intense and just overall mind-numbing thrash metal albums I think I've ever heard. It's obviously a kind of modern thrash metal sort of sound, but for the music that these guys pump out in standard E-tune, if you're a guitar player, you'll know exactly what I'm on, or you're in a band, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. But for standard E-tune, and these guys easily pump out some of the most heaviest, most mind-numbing riffs on the planet. Like, I love the majestic, serenading sort of parts on this album, but I absolutely love the musicianship from how precise and how much precision is involved with this release to execute it on perfect levels of just mind-blowing musicianship. That's the only way you can describe it. It's majestic, it's melodic, it's quite progressive in a lot of elements, but there's a lot of attack, and like as I said, for E-standard tuning, there's a lot of heaviness. This is up there with the like of showing the likes of, yeah, all you 8-stringers and 7-stringers, yeah, you just can see he is a heavy, but the likes of Lamb of God's older stuff, and this album definitely brings the heavy for just high-end tuning. I think it's absolutely amazing. I mean, if you haven't heard the song Teras, wow, I'll leave the link to that song down below, but this album is just one of the classics in UK metal, if you ask me. It came out in 2008 under Nuclear Blast Records, and they're still going strong, like with their recent albums, but this one definitely hits the beans for me. And Jamie Graham, who was formerly in Heart of a Coward, does vocals on this album, and he does an excellent job once again. He's an absolutely amazing vocalist and great lyricist, and this is an absolutely amazing album. Definitely one of my all-time favourites when it comes to just metal in general. So make sure you check out Sylosis with Conclusion of an Age. Definitely a classic in UK metal, if you ask me. Alright, next up, we've got some old school death metal. I thought we'd dwell into some of that. And this is another album that I discussed in my unpackaging video that I said I might talk about. And I decided I am going to. Because I remember people talking about this when this got repressed, and I don't exactly see people talking about it a lot nowadays. I know it's regarded as an absolute classic in old school death metal, and quite rightly so, but this is absolutely amazing. I'm talking about Nocturnus with The Key. Now, this is obviously regarded as a very classic album in metal in general. Sci-fi kind of themed old school death metal. Kind of has a bit of a, in my personal opinion, when I hear, obviously the sci-fi elements are very important on this album, and I think it really adds it. And I would love to expose myself to a lot more bands like this. So if you know any bands like Nocturnus with that spacey kind of old school death metal kind of vibe, leave some comments down below. I'd love to discover some new music, or any bands that anyone wants us to check out. Leave a comment down below and I'll tell you if I've checked them out or whatever. But anyway, this album kind of has a bit of a death kind of vibe to it, and that's what kind of I think attracted us to this album. But when I listen to it, the vocals kind of have that bit of a carcass kind of vibe to them. Like, they feel really aggressive, very gnarly, and just very overall just quite, how can we say, like, overwhelming in an essence. It feels like very alien, like, in some ways, no pun intended. It does feel very putrid, but it definitely has a lot of vibes on this album that definitely add and make it a very unique release for old school death metal. And like slam and brutal death metal, the recipe doesn't change a lot for old school death metal, but I think these guys definitely changed the ball game with adding this sort of vibe to this album, and I think it really overall gives it a bit of originality, and definitely, in my personal opinion, gives it just a likeable factor. And I think this album is definitely earned its place as a classic. This was released under Unique Leader, Earache Records. I can't remember, in 2000. So make sure you check out this album. I absolutely love it. It's definitely grown to be one of my favourite of the old school classic albums. I think you just need to hear it. I gave it the chance. I definitely need to check out their album. I think it's called Threshold or Thresholds, I can't remember, but I definitely need to check that album out. But this one definitely has the old school vibe, and definitely as original as it was for back in the day, it still holds the test of time, if you ask me. And there are some absolutely bangers on this album, so make sure you check it out. It definitely has a bit of a if it's like death with a bit of a sci-fi kind of vibe, and then with carcass kind of I'd say a bit of hard work kind of era vocals over the top, but I definitely really appreciate it. It's a great album. Definitely check it out if you haven't already, and you're into old school death metal, you'll find something to like about them anyway. And the final one is always the release that I'd personally recommend to you the most, and this one, for me personally, is the greatest of these 5. Like, I bigged up all these releases, but this one blew the living shit out of me. This one came out in 2014, so 4 years ago, and quite frankly, I'm disappointed in myself that I didn't check this out. This has turned into one of my favourite death metal albums to listen to. It's pummeling and intense as I guess. It's, in an essence, it kind of reminds us of like the likes of Nile, Dying Fetus, with a bit of heaviness of the likes of Suffocation, for example. That's the kind of vibe that I get from this, but it's definitely one of the best technical brutal death metal albums I've heard in a long time. I'm talking about Decimation with Reign of Ungodly Creation. Wow, this is easily one of the most pummeling albums I think I've heard in death metal in a long ass time. When this came on, and the first track kicks in, which is called Non-Celestial Orisons Cataclysed in the Passage of Nim. They've got really long song titles like Nile does, so, but yeah, the first track, when that kicks in after the fade in, and it just kicks in with the drums and like full on, and you're just like, ooh, it hits that perfect spot for unbridled, unrelenting, just obnoxious technical death metal. It's like unbelievable. It definitely has a bit of a Dying Fetus kind of vibe to it. It's not as riffy oriented as like modern Dying Fetus. It's just it kind of reminds us a bit of Descent to Depravity in a way, but I definitely think this one has a bit more of a cooler vibe to it. It definitely made me just go. It's just literally, if you want something to rip your face off and decimate you with, like, for example, Hate Eternal kind of intensity, then this is definitely for you. This is easily one of the most pummeling albums I think I've heard this year, like, that hasn't come out in 2018, but it blew us away. Like, all these albums I checked out recently, except for Sylosis, I've knew that for years, but particularly for death metal releases I wanted to talk about, this one definitely blew me away the most. It's monstrous as it gets. It's an absolutely monstrous death metal release, and props to Comatose Music for making this album possible in 2014. I'm hoping that, because it's been so long, that these guys have a new album in the works. I would love to see a follow-up to this, because this is incredible. I've got this shirt of the album artwork, or a shirt of the album artwork, so I might rep that at a show one time. We'll just see what happens, but yeah, this is crushing, absolutely crushing. Easily one of the best death metal releases I've heard in a long ass fucking time. It's up there, if you ask me. It's overtaken a lot that I've checked out. But yeah, there's 5 releases for you to check out. Oracle's Miserycorde, Carnal Decay, You Owe You Pay, Sylosis, Conclusion of an Age, Nocturnus, The Key, and my main recommendation for this video is Decimation with Reign of Ungodly Creation. Excellent, excellent stuff. Like as I said, all these releases you need to check out if you're in extreme sort of stuff and you want something that's full of intensity and has the vibe that makes you pull that face. That, ooh, yeah. But anyway, I've got a couple more super metal recommendation episodes in the pipeline. I've got a one where I'm going to be completely dedicated to like not so well known releases or overlooked releases, if you ask me, and I've got other ones like this one and maybe a Death Metal Spectacular Part 3. We'll see what happens, but obviously CD reviews, album reviews and updates and purchases are going to be coming in the coming weeks, but we'll see what happens, what videos I manage to get done. So I'll see you until the next video, and remember, stay metal, and I'll see you later.